when we were talking to him the other day, was saying he doesn't like it. He thinks it's too slow. You don't have enough hand space a lot of the time as mage to be able to play it. But Fino clearly blazing his own path here with his mage deck, which for the moment, obviously, the first game of the series has to play his primary deck. So a lot less threats, very light of a deck, not really equipped to be beating Warrior.
Now, we said that, of course, and Kalento made pretty good work of Boston in game number 1. And if I'm going to reference Boston's list in the past and compare it to Bunnyhoppor's, they're quite similar. If I can manage to separate paper.
You gotta lick your finger in there.
Had a copy of Super Collider in the main deck for Boston.
Yep.
Didn't get it done. Still only one copy of Brawl for each.
So basically, this deck is not equipped to beat Mage. The primary deck.
For Bunnyhoppor?
For Bunnyhoppor.
2 Omega Devastators, 1 Brawl.
No Execute, no Super Collider.
Yeah, it's tough.
Obviously, the tertiary deck for him with double Big Game Hunter, Brawl, and double Super Collider is significantly more equipped to deal with it.
Now, the big thing to really look at there is the difference in tempo that's going to be here, where I feel like Bunnyhoppor is off to a really good start here with Town Crier, Augmented Alec, and with Militia Commander. Yeah. But he just does not have the backup for this. Archivist Elysiana already drawn. I know that at times when I play this matchup, I either feel like I'm super dominant from the Warrior side or a complete reversal of roles. I don't feel like it's close.
I can see that. It is a weird matchup, and there's a lot of counterplay that Bunnyhoppor needs to be aware of, I think, in that just tempoing out his minions turn after turn is not necessarily the best way to approach this, because you don't want to make your opponent's Sea Giants and Rabble Mounters too cheap. That can really help hurt your game plan if you're giving them extra minions to cast those Conjurer's Callings.
Ooh. Apologize that Bunnyhoppor's camera is experiencing some technical issues. We know that you want to see him think, and so do I. We're going to try to get that fixed as quickly as we can. That'll have to do for now.
That'll do, Pig. And for Bunnyhoppor here, it's actually having cast division here and being able to see both players' hands makes this a lot easier, because for him, depending on what his opponent's hand is, massively shapes how he wants to play this. If it's full of the Mana Cyclone nonsense with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, having down the...
Fino's in for quite a series if this is bothering him.
Having down the project could have helped to clear them off. But in the end, he ropes the entire turn and then coins 3 drop.
Well, I mean, this is Bunnyhoppor in a nutshell.
Yes.
He takes his time to think about these situations because he's not necessarily thinking about now. He's thinking about turn 4 and turn 5 and turn 6, helping to develop a game plan and trying to catch every single thing. I actually talked with Bunnyhoppor right after his match with Viper at the World Championship, where he had lost a series in game 5 in a very close 5-game set. And the first thing he said to me was, "I can't believe I messed up in the first game." And I go, "What do you mean?" And he turn 3, he made a mistake, and that, to his claim to me, was the reason that he lost the series versus Viper was that one mistake. Wow. Why not take your time?
Yeah.
If you're taking all your time and still making mistakes sometimes, it's just a lot more complicated than it seems like on the onset.
I fully agree. And it was not even that easy of a turn. Like, if you coin 3 drop here, you have no follow-up. You're waiting until turn 4 before you can even develop anything whatsoever. And like you said, it turns out yet again that these very self-critical players are always the ones who are rising up to the top.
I will shoot.
In contrast, Fino, I think, very much, in totality, a different kind of player than Bunnyhoppor is, where I think the pace of play for Fino, almost the quicker it is, the more comfortable he is.
Yeah.
And I felt like, watching players for half a decade now, like, being in your own groove is so important to playing good Hearthstone.
Yeah. I fully agree. I think Fino is... I'm trying to think of the nice way to say it. He's one of the most self-confident players, but that's good, because he's really blooming good at Hearthstone. He should believe he's very fantastic at the game. And it's kind of in contrast to a lot of the other players, where even though he is one of the all-time great grinders, he just was seshing ladder every single season, always getting top 25 at the end. He just gets the game. He doesn't really have to work especially hard to be at the top level, even though he does to perfect his play. He's just always really been up at the highest level of Hearthstone. He just gets it.
Picked up his tour stop win in Orange County.
That's right.
Last year. That was an incredible final between him and Casey.
I remember it well. I was rooting for both players very heavily there. They both deserve the win so bad.
It is tough to root for both players. It really is, but by golly, I couldn't help but do it at that event. There was just no way I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
And so for Bunnyhoppor here, the interesting turn has arisen where how much do you care about a mountain giant? And if I'm in Bunnyhoppor's spot, the answer is a lot.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen in the previous games, like with Boston, where he double shield slammed both the Grave Horrors that came off the Giant because you don't want them to copy them again. Conjurer's Call is too scary.
Yeah, so if you contrast that game that Kalento had, where he was patient on the Giant and just hero powering down a Clockwork Goblin, it's very different than facing down an Augmented Alec, where it takes you 4 hero powers instead of 3. And additionally, it's threatening to generate extra bombs instead of having already done that. You know, I think Kalento had the liberty of being very patient in that scenario. I don't necessarily believe that's true for Fino in this game.
I agree with you, and I think the other reason is that Kalento, the only minions in his hand that were good to cast Conjurer's Calling on were the Giants. That was it. Whereas here, obviously, Fino is opted to put the Rabble Bouncers in his deck, which is another very powerful minion to get the Conjurer's Calling.
Just visually, the difference between
weapons,
the way the two players are working is just so grand to me.
Fino has already played his turn before it's even started.
And if this was Fino versus Fino, we would have had a Dinomatic already played and probably some sort of Mana Cyclone turn that resulted in a different hand than we're currently looking at.
Yeah. Oh, we'd be long gone. I'd be back at the apartment by now.
What now?
Casting it like it's a, I don't know, what's cast really fast? I was trying to think of something and I just couldn't. I started to realize.
What is cast fast?
Like, where there's like high-paced action and it's a constant go.
Hearthstone. An auction.
Ah, like an auction.
Like an auctioneer.
Like an auctioneer. Not one from Gadgets In, though. He doesn't do much talking after that first line.
As now for Fino, it's that kind of hand that you end up with a lot where without a Mountain Giant in hand, no matter how much stuff you have in hand, it doesn't make much difference. Then nothing will make the Rabble Bouncer cheaper here other than obviously your opponent developing, which you can't control. And so even though he can pop off with a Mana Cyclone turn here, unless he hits exactly Arcane Intellect or Research Project off of the spells from that, he's not getting any closer to his big threats.
I think this is the nice middle ground. Yep. Good old Ziliax. Just a good card.
Understatement of the year.
And so now how Bunnyhoppor responds is getting interesting to me as well, because if you just Militia Commander here, that's pretty much your last real piece of removal for a bit. But at the same time, you want to save Weapons Project to activate the Shield Slam that's there.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're afraid of a Giant in the coming turns, or your opponent just dropping Rabble Bouncer, we could see Militia Commander Hero Power this turn to clear off the minion. Next turn, Hero Power plus the Weapons Project, even if your opponent pings your face, still gets you up to 8. And then you can obviously Shield Slam to finish off one of the big threats. So
yeah, just trying to bridge the gap to the Omega Devastators.
Pretty much.
That's really the puzzle here.
Much.
One of the big things that has happened to me too with playing Warrior is when I run out of gas, I've had like this major apprehensiveness behind playing Archivist Elysiana.
Right, I was going to talk about Elysiana next, yeah.
Well, go on.
Well, I was just wondering, you're the expert. What would you think of playing Elysiana on turn 8? Assuming your opponent doesn't develop a minion that you have to remove, do you just play it because it's a 7/7 body? And also, you can find some good anti-mage cards off of the Discover. There's a lot of removal in Warren.
I think 8's a little bit early.
Okay.
But I've only been in this situation a couple times where I think it's been reasonable to, you know, even consider Elysiana was capable of winning the game.
Right.
I'm starting to believe that when you get in that situation where you're just out of gas, it's probably better to do it. Now, this is one of the dire situations that Bunnyhopper's run into. A giant came down and it got Conjurers calling. You need to clear both, and you can't.
What now?
You know, I think about that Ziliax now. Was it simply better to just Warpath Ziliax?
Right.
You know, was it simply better to just take some hits from Ziliax? I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer because your tendency with Control Warrior and one of the major benefits of the deck is that it clears things fairly efficiently.
Yeah, it's very interesting point. And I mean, like you can just see here, this is the situation where if you had double Super Collider in your deck, you just smack these two together and you're laughing all the way to the bank. But for the moment, it's not that simple.
Yep, looking at Bunnyhopper's tertiary deck, which I imagine will be in play for game number 2. 2 copies of Super Collider, the second copy of Brawl, 2 copies of Big Game Hunter are what's on slate to be added. Like in this situation here, Bunnyhopper really, I think, needs to consider what is it like just play a Turnium over.
Also,
the fact that your opponent's going to get some development.
It's worth pointing out that Bunnyhopper knows that there is a Conjurer's Call in Feno's hand because Feno opted to play the first half of the other Conjurer's Call in his hand rather than play the second half of the discovered Conjurer's Call in his hand, presumably to keep his hand size as high as possible, which, you know, makes sense to go for that. But it does mean that Bunnyhopper has more information is the trade-off with that line of play.
I am really wondering when this Mana Cyclone turn happens. When you just pop off.
With Conjurer's hand space at the moment. Like,
we haven't really seen Khadgar have a pop off today.
I don't think we've seen Khadgar once.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And it's in the deck list. Speaking of popping off, however.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Runs out on
How many Conjurer's Calling has he got?
He's got 1 half left. Yeah, that's a right on turn 9 as well. This is really that moment where it's critical to have a way to white board, and Bunnyhopper doesn't have that.
Ooh, Harrison can't draw you through to a brawl.
This is really, honestly, this is such a good lesson here from Feno because this is, I think, one of the keys to his success all year long. Was there were 2 things that Feno would do. Number 1, he would wait until it was so good against his opponent's ideal turn to make his power plays, and then number 2, he would just use resources to avoid disaster scenarios happening. He would actively go out his way and make worse looking plays to keep the absolute worst game-losing turn from happening to you.
So how has that happened here?
Well, he's taken away the ability for Bunnyhopper to do anything good on turn 9. Like, it's literally only Brawl is the only good play here.
Right. Okay, yeah, so it's just making your opponent have the...
yeah, like if you do this on turn 8 and your opponent has an answer, like, you have no way to disrupt them on turn 9. They're free to just develop and bridge the gap.
Yeah, that's fair enough, but for the moment it does just look like Bunnyhopper is, like you said, unable to deal with what Feno's throwing down. What is that? 14, 22 damage that can come through there.
23, 24, 25 with the Banana Buffoon. So he needs 2 damage.
Yeah, still just ever so slightly off, which he could, of course, go for off the Mana Cyclone.
I think that's the turn for it.
what to do. What to do.
Get in there, you buffoon. What buffoonery is this? Chuck in 1 Ray of Frost.
So by staying at 4 mana, he has Fireball for an out, as well as obviously Frostbolt.
This also gives him the deal 2 damage at a 1/2. That's not the format anymore. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was Ongoro.
Well, we're gonna go for it again.
Runs out on
Ooh, nothing quite there, but Counterspell just to disrupt your opponent. That little bit more is a great way to keep things rolling, as it does need to be the brawl right now for there to be any chance whatsoever.
And by the way, they're at 3.
They are also at 3, I will give you that.
And that's gonna wrap up that game. Bunnyhoppor cannot fight back with the cards in hand.
And this is a really interesting development for how I think the meta will shape out overall over the next few weeks, because it looks like this kind of build of Bomb Warrior that's very light on removal, much more tempo oriented, doesn't seem to beat this mage. It just seems to lack the threats that you need to disrupt their power turns. So maybe even if we're seeing a lot of